On this edition of Independent Sources, exposing prison injustice, how the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions aims to reveal inequalities within the prison system.
I think we're in the middle of the new millennial movement for justice that will be remembered in the way that the civil rights movement is remembered now. And I think that's something that is important because it begs everyone to answer the question, you know, what role will you have?
And stem the tide. Could a new laundry and dry cleaning app save the declining New York laundromat business?
We provide a complete package for them to help bring technology into their business and kind of bring them into today's era.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Zyphus Lebrun. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, more than 650,000 people are released from state and federal prisons annually, and even greater numbers released from local jails. Research has shown that 2/3 of these offenders will be rearrested, and many will be reincarcerated within 3 years of their release. What are we doing wrong? The Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions says the answer is in changing the model from one of criminal justice to human justice. Dr. Divine Pryor is the executive director of the program, and Breon Bain is an NYU professor and prison activist. Abby Shola spoke with them about the program that provides a second chance to the formerly and currently incarcerated.
Dr. Pryor, I'll start with you. How was the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions created?
Wow, the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions was created out of an idea back in 2003 when its founder, the late Eddie Ellis, who just passed away recently in July, was a senior consultant for the Open Society Institute, which is now the Open Society Foundation. And he was a person who was formerly incarcerated. He, prior to going to prison, was the spokesperson for the Black Panther Party here in New York, and he was very active in prison and very involved. And some might say he's a prison abolitionist. And he was receiving a lot of compliments from, you know, staff at the Open Society Institute about how intelligent he was and how brilliant he was. And while he appreciated the spirit of it, he was also somewhat annoyed because he was getting the impression they thought he was special, you know. And he responded by saying that I'm not really special, you know, there are probably many folks like me. And that's when the conversation about organizing formerly incarcerated people, particularly professionals, came about. And he was able to secure a rather handsome grant to travel around the United States and identify men and women who were formerly incarcerated, who were leaders in their own right, who were doing public policy and research and community organizing work, who had at least 5 years removed from the incarceration experience, and who were at least executive or senior members in their organizations, but most importantly, who had academic credentials and who were willing to self-disclose their status. And out of that 2003 organizing work, we identified our first 100 people between 2003 and 2004 who met that criteria. And since then, we're now in the hundreds of individuals who were formerly incarcerated, either as juveniles or as adults, who have advanced degrees, who are leaders, who are teachers and researchers and policy analysts and social workers, and who are impacting criminal justice policy in significant ways across the United States and even abroad.
That's amazing. So what kind of services do you offer through the organization?
Well, we do a lot of training. We provide technical assistance services, capacity building services, educational services. Some of our direct services, we help individuals clean up their rap sheets and apply for certificates of rehabilitation so they can overcome discriminatory barriers for people with criminal convictions. We provide youth services, mentorship services, counseling, and a whole range of services, I think, that cover the full spectrum of criminal justice issues.
Wow. And Breon, describe the work you do with the organization.
So I actually met Eddie at one of those first meetings when he connected with George Soros, and we, you know, immediately, I saw him as a mentor and as an elder and somebody I could learn tremendously from. And so I began then to sort of work with the organization. I actually also began taking artists and activists and educators into prisons around the country to perform and do workshops and to link folks who are incarcerated to communities that are directly impacted by incarceration. And so that year was a really powerful year for me because it began my connection to Eddie Ellis, to Kyung-Ji Ri, who is also with the Center for New Leadership with Divine Prior, and my work as an artist, my work as an educator, you know, from that point forward, has been influenced by their really powerful analysis, which challenges sort of the mainstream view of what's happening with prisons and policing in this country, and takes a more radical and revolutionary approach to actually looking at the problems that are finally on the radar screen across the country.
So you're going into the prisons and talking to the men there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I actually started in about the late 80s. I was about 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
In 89, 90, when I first went into prisons to just perform for the holidays. And it was almost on a dare that, you know, we were asked to go in, and we went in, we were hooked. My brothers, my cousins, and I, and we went back every year for the holiday season. It was only, you know, a decade later when I found myself in the facility and didn't have the option to leave under different circumstances that I began to sort of realize the political dimensions of what's been happening with prisons. And so New Leadership and Prison Moratorium Project there, which came before New Leadership, and other organizations that I work with, Malcolm X grassroots movement, groups like the Correctional Association of New York that are in our network of organizations, really have been at the forefront of raising this issue to the level of public conversation and discourse that has forced even the presidential candidates at this point to actually address the crisis and incarceration that the country is facing.
Yeah. And speaking on that, the New York Times recently did an article about the disappearance of black men.
Right.
And it talked about how from age about 15 to 50, black men are disappearing. They're going to jail. So what do you think is contributing to this decline?
Well, I read the article, and I thought the article was very interesting, you know, in that, you know, it made it appear as if, you know, black men were just recently starting to disappear.
Yeah.
Black men have been disappearing in America. In fact, prior to America, they were disappearing from the shores of Africa where they were kidnapped and brought into enslavement. Then they were disappearing in the Caribbean islands when they were seasoned and broken in. And then they were disappeared again when they failed to cooperate and failed to change their names to Toby from Kunte Kinte. And then they continued to disappear after systems were put in place to ensure that the chattel slavery system was maintained, using the legal system as the apparatus to give it legitimacy. And so to now talk about the disappearing of black men, like, really? I mean, you know, I thought that it was, you know, quite insulting, to be quite honest with you. But since they raised the issue, it gives us an opportunity to say, well, since you noticed, you know, after hundreds of years, you're now noticing that black men are disappearing, let's talk about how that's happening. Let's talk about how the school to prison pipeline, for instance, contributes to so many young people being entangled in a system where they should otherwise be just going to the principal's office and having a parent-teacher conference and the guidance counselor providing with support. Let's talk about the fact that in the communities where they come from, that there are no after-school programs, there are no tutorial programs, there are no mentorship programs, that the infrastructure in those communities have been devastated by the so-called war on drugs. Let's talk about the fact that these communities that are supporting the prison system have the highest rates of unemployment, have dilapidated housing conditions, have substandard educational systems, and a whole range of other factors which might naturally contribute to someone being entangled in the system. Let's talk about the fact that black men have disappeared because the media have portrayed them as monsters and as villains and as less than and devalued them. Let's talk about a society who has demonized black men from the very beginning, and the fact of the matter is that this has been continued throughout the media. So if they really want to talk about disappearing black men, I think that we have room to have a very serious conversation about that.
And I think the conversation will have to also, I mean, think about, you know, the reality that, you know, there's 4 times as many black men incarcerated in this country than were incarcerated in South Africa during apartheid, which the world consensus, you know, there's no doubt that that was a white supremacist, racist regime in power. So if this regime's treatment of black men is even worse than that regime's treatment, then it begs, you know, several questions for us to sort of dig deeper. But I also want to really think about changing and challenging the narrative that limits the way that our communities are being affected, you know, to just the experience of black men, right? You know, black men are certainly, the numbers in prison are above and beyond everyone else. But we have to look at the fact that women are the fastest demographic to be incarcerated. We have to look at the way that black women have been invisible in much of this conversation. While we talk about the incidents of police brutality around the country, we don't know the names of black women in the way that we know the names of some of the black men who've come up in in the media recently. I think that is intentional. I think that is very intentional because it distracts us away from the fact that our families, our communities, right, are being affected in a way that they have since we were actually introduced to this continent, right? And so I think that's something that to dehistoricize, to decontextualize what's actually happening. It's important to look at those who are affected worse in our communities, but we also don't want to remove black men from the rest of the family, the rest of the community in a way that actually makes it appear as if the entire circle that has been affected is not being affected. So that's something that I want to also push as well with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
You know, it was queer black women and trans folks who actually were involved in pushing that forward, making that something that folks are in the streets marching and carrying banners, you know, to represent. So I think that's a conversation that we want to make sure we expand this one to include.
Okay, and let's talk about success stories from your organization. Can you describe anyone who's come out of it and done really well afterwards?
Absolutely, and not because of, but in spite of. In spite of all of the statutory and regulatory barriers that limit access into society after individuals attempt to integrate, despite of the stigma that's associated with individuals who have done time in prison, in spite of the fact that we live in a democracy that says that fairness and equity are the founding principles on which we stand, but yet at the same time, after an individual has served their time and paid their debt in full to society, they still face a lifetime of discrimination and differential treatment. In spite of all that, we have dozens of individuals, I won't even speak about myself, who have been able to overcome those challenges. We have individuals now who are medical doctors. We have individuals who are lawyers. We have individuals who are running multi-million-dollar nonprofit organizations. We have individuals who are members of the clergy. We have individuals who are doing exceptional research, all of whom are formerly incarcerated. The individual, for instance, who runs the Returning Citizens Organization in Washington, D.C., who happens to be a member of the board of directors of the Center for New Leadership, a formerly incarcerated individual whose office is connected to the executive branch in Washington, D.C., who not only influences policy but has the power to make policy. We have a woman, Vivian Nixon, right here in New York, who on the college initiative, who's been responsible for sending hundreds of formerly incarcerated women through the college systems here in New York, and who all now are placed in policy positions and teaching positions and research positions, and who are running agencies of their own. So I think that we've had a major impact. In fact, some of the things we're doing at the center are quite exceptional. And again, you know, just mentioning my own work, I never thought that there would be a day when I would be consulting with judges, and I would be consulting with defense attorneys, and I would be actually training probation officers and actually working with the NYPD. In fact, something that I find quite exceptional is that after engaging in a meeting with Bill Bratton, the police commissioner, I was pretty critical of the system, and his response was, while he appreciated my comments, he didn't know whether or not, you know, I was actually qualified to make those kind of criticisms because I didn't understand just how comprehensive the NYPD was and how their tactics and methodologies and their unique history actually influence what happened today. So someone made a suggestion, well, perhaps Dr. Pryor should then go through your academy. That way he gets a first-hand glance. And it just so happens that the NYPD has such an academy that they call the Citizens Police Academy. So I thought it would be apropos if I just kind of showed my certificate as a graduate from that academy. And I don't know if this has happened before, but there may not have been many individuals like me who hold a doctorate degree in criminal justice, who's formerly incarcerated, who's a teacher, a trainer, a motivational speaker, and has also now completed their academy with full satisfaction. So, I mean, thank you for asking that question, but there are so much that we do, and that's just one of many examples.
Wow. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
And it seems like, in speaking to you, it seems that paying it forward is the key here. Former incarcerated people reaching out to young members of the community now. Is that the case?
I think it's a big part of, that's part of our history. Harry Belafonte calls it Sankofa, and Sankofa.org is his organization that works on that. And I mean, and he's somebody that's worth thinking about just because his legacy of like helping to, you know, fundraise with Sidney Poitier when Dr. King and other activists ran out of money, helping to fund the movement when there was going to be no movement without the resources. I mean, that's the tradition we come from. That's the intergenerational support, passing the torch so that the struggle to actually improve and transform our communities and our lives continues. That's the spirit of this work, and it's something that I think we're in the middle of the new millennial movement for justice that will be remembered in the way that the civil rights movement is remembered now. And I think that's something that is important because it begs everyone to answer the question, what role will you have? If you're not going to be part of the problem, how can you be part of the solution?
Absolutely.
And when you look back 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, when you talk to your children and your grandchildren, and you say there was this big movement to actually change the fact that the United States is taking freedom away from more people than any country in the world, than any other country in human history. What role did you have in turning the tide and changing things? And many folks, will not have the ability to say that they were a part of that movement, but there's an opportunity right now for everyone, whether you're going to storm the barricade, bring prison education programs to college universities, or do work in the community. There's an opportunity for everyone from every walk of life to actually be involved in pushing the movement forward.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Breon Bain and Dr. Pryor, for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Independent Sources. Laundromats and dry cleaners used to be a fixture of New York streets. Now they're quickly disappearing. 10% of coin-operated laundromats have folded in the last 10 years. And many of these laundromats were immigrant-owned. But a new app called TRRIGR hopes to clean up by connecting customers and laundromats via smartphone. I sat down with TRRIGR's founder, Joe Tillman. So, Joe, let's talk a little bit about TRRIGR. Why did you decide to launch this application?
The dry cleaning and laundry industry is a very low-tech industry in a very high-tech society. And there's not too many tools out there for consumers to efficiently conduct business with local dry cleaners and laundromats. And we built an app that enables a user to search for a specific dry cleaner in their neighborhood and tools for the dry cleaner to actually modernize their business.
And you said tools to modernize their business. What are you talking about?
So we built a complete back end for the dry cleaner to actually manage their order flow and their processes and stuff, update users on the status of their order, and eventually incorporate the likes of the way that they do business now into this software.
Wow. So are you guys also providing a sort of maybe advertising option for advertising for your clients as well?
At the moment, we handle all of the advertising to drive the usage to the app, right? There will potentially be in the future highlight positions and featured positions for other dry cleaners to get better exposure.
I know that the app just launched on June 15th. So far, how many cleaners have you guys gotten onto the app?
Currently listed in the app, there's 16. We've got another 20 to 25 in the waitings that have actually signed up with us. And progressively over the next few weeks, we'll include maybe 5 to 6 a week as we see the need for specific areas throughout the city.
Now, are there prerequisites that these folks have to fill out in order to be able to sign on with you guys?
So we do put them through somewhat of a pre-qualification check, right? They obviously need to be able to use the technology that we give them. They have to be able to take on the additional workload. Some of the different things that we talk about with them are you capable of accepting new business? Can you deliver to a specific service area outside of just the 4 blocks that surround your business and such, right? So we do ask a number of different pre-qualifying questions before we allow a vendor in the app.
Now, I know that in the case of dry cleaners and so forth in New York area, there's been a trend that where it's mainly Korean business owners and so forth. Are you seeing this as a way to maybe help them boost their business at a time when probably they're being challenged by other more modernized cleaners, cleaning services?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you've got a handful of them that actually still operate business out of a handwritten ticket system. A lot have upgraded to a computer that helps monetize and keep track of all of the orders that come in from each of their customers, but they're a small business and they have very little resources to do so. Advertising is limited to things like Valpak and potentially Yelp or maybe Google, right? And we provide a complete package for them to help bring technology into their business and kind of bring them into today's era.
Now, what are some of your kind of goals? I mean, when you start this now, you're looking at 15 and you're saying you're looking to add some more people along the way. What are kind of some of your benchmarks that you want to hit in the next few weeks and months?
Absolutely. So currently we cover every part of Manhattan. Our goal for the next 60 days is to add an additional 2 to 5 dry cleaners for each area of Manhattan alone. By the end of the summer, we're going to be moving into the outer boroughs. And then we have a very aggressive 12-month plan to launch in the top 10 cities across the U.S.
I've asked you so many questions about different things. Most pressing one, though, someone wants to get the app. How does it work? How does the app go about getting you connected with these dry cleaners?
Sure. So currently it's available on iPhone only. We'll be launching an Android version in the upcoming months. But when you download the app, you've got 2 paths to take. You can place an express order, and those are for people that just want to get their clothes picked up. They don't have time to go through it and say, I've got 12 pants, 9 shirts, and such. Or you've got a Build My Bag feature for individuals that are looking for accountability. They want to actually dictate what they have to be picked up, and they want to actually see pricing estimate up front. They choose the Build My Bag feature, and then they can go in and exactly what I just said. They can dictate how many items of what kind of clothing that they have. They'll then search for a dry cleaner to use. Based on their pickup location, the delivery address that they place in the system, up will come dry cleaners that can service their area. And they can sort by many different features. They can price compare, they can sort by distance, they can look at rates and reviews, because we have users that actually input their experience after they've used one of the services. They'll dictate the time that they want to have the clothes picked up, and that's it. The dry cleaner will then come and service the items. When the clothes are ready, they'll get a notification on their phone, and they can choose when to have everything delivered.
Are you partnering with any organizations as regards to outreach to various communities, and maybe a little assistance as regards to money-wise?
Money-wise, as far as?
Like assistance, startup capital, and so forth for you.
So currently the company is self-funded, and we are in the midst right now of talking to a few preliminary investors. Yes.
Are they on the level of like maybe community outreach to these organizations, or rather to these companies? Are you enlisting any community organizations to help you reach out to more of the dry cleaners on the ground?
We are. So we made a partnership with the Korean Association of New York Dry Cleaners, and basically we'll eventually be making donation back to the organization for every dry cleaner that's a part of that association that signs up with us. In addition, there's a charitable organizations feature inside of the app where we give back to the community as well. Right? So we have a loyalty system whereby which when a user places an order, for every $1 that they spend, they accumulate points along the way. And they can either redeem those points in the future for a discount on their order, or they can choose from the list of partner organizations that we've partnered with and choose to give back those points, and we make a donation on their behalf to a handful of organizations that affect the Manhattan community.
Well, Joel, it was a real pleasure meeting you, and good luck to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.